So I guess the first question I'd like to ask you all is, have you heard of climate change before?
Have you heard of climate change before? What's up, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. I saw this video, very disturbing video by Earthling Ed, where he brainwashes 10-year-olds into this processed food agenda by big corporations under the guise of environmentalism and ethics.
And so what are the causes of climate change?
Climate change.
CO2.
CO2, great. And where does CO2 come from?
You breathe CO2. You exhale CO2.
Gasoline is like and then
Yeah.
airplane.
Absolutely, that's a great answer, yeah. What else is a cause of climate change? Yeah.
Methane.
And where does methane come from?
Your asshole. It's also on your breath. You exhale these bad gases.
They're from waste of animals.
Yeah.
That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, caused by the digestion of animals, all the fats.
By the digestion of animals. Humans are animals, right?
So who here has heard that animals or animal farming has contributed to climate change? That's great. So methane is even worse for the environment than CO2. In fact, it could be anywhere between 20 to 26 times worse than carbon dioxide.
It could be, right? He doesn't know. Nobody knows. And it's an estimate, okay? A lot of conjecture here. There's no proof for any of this.
All the cows and the goats and the sheep, and the fact they're constantly consuming food, and so they're always digesting, which means they're always producing this gas.
How dare they consume food and fart?
And then we take all their manure, all the feces that they pass through their digestion, and we use it for fertilizers, for plants and for crops. The manure also releases toxic greenhouse gases like methane and also nitrous oxide as well, which is even worse for the environment.
So when you compost manure or whatever, when plants die and they happen to find themselves in an anaerobic environment, they release methane. If air is a big part of the decomposition of these plants when they die naturally out in the world, they produce CO2, right? And then when new plants grow, they absorb both methane and CO2. And methane breaks down by means of UV light in the atmosphere. It takes a few years. I don't remember how many exactly, but eventually it breaks down. Yeah, it's part of Earth's natural cycle. Methane, CO2 production and reabsorption into the earth, the plants, bodies of water, so on and so forth. It's just part of Earth's natural cycle. Natural cycle. But remember, nature to the vegan is a fallacy.
And we talked about the temperatures rising and how that's really bad for animals. And what about humans as well? What happens to humans that live in, say, the equator, the really hot area of the world? What will happen as the temperatures rise?
Okay, so we went from global warming to global climate change, and we're back to global warming yet again because it fits the narrative, right? You said climate change. It means it's changing. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get warm. It'll get warmer here. It'll get colder there. But, you know, he has an agenda, doesn't he?
Go on.
They either perish
Yeah.
or they starve to death.
Yep. Or I guess another option would be that they move, that they travel or they migrate. People have to move either further north or south, and of course north makes more sense. So they'll come up to Europe, into the North America, so we're looking at the USA and Canada, to try and find colder climate.
When temperatures rise globally, there is more plant life because does anybody know what winter is? When it gets really, really cold, what happens to the plants? Majority of plants on this planet would die forever. A lot of plants that are adapted to that climate simply die off, right? So in the winter, for example, where there is a true winter with temperatures below 0 Celsius, all these plants die off, or at least they go dormant. They're not producing any oxygen, are they? Now you warm up the planet, you're going to foster a greater variety of plants, and the duration which these plants live will be extended, right? You're going to have more plant life, 24/7, 365, meaning these plants are going to release more oxygen. When they die off, they will also release more carbon dioxide and methane, right? But then there will be other plants growing, absorbing all that. Once again, this is just what happens. This is the natural cycle. When the planet warms, the oceans release CO2, which is necessary for plant life, right? which all of a sudden has more environment to grow because the planet is warmer. These idiots, these ideologues, these dogmatic dunces thinking that they can improve on nature, all they're doing is screwing it up. Wake up, people.
Like also overpopulation.
Absolutely.
More resources, and then the cycle comes.
But we have less resources because our planet is so hot.
We have less resources because our planet is so hot. What? What is he talking about? Where did the resources go? Where did they go? Because the planet is hot. Did they evaporate or something? What happened to all the resources? Give me a break. Fuck it, let's settle Antarctica, right? What's the big deal? Why is Greenland called Greenland and Iceland, Iceland? When Greenland is full of ice and Iceland is usually green, often so. Why? Because climate change. Climate's always been changing, and it will continue to do that. Antarctica is ginormous. Let all that shit melt. Who cares? It'll flood some places. Big deal. There's going to be more water. Don't we have a crisis? Apparently there's not enough water. Melt all of that shit, right? There'll be more water in the atmosphere. There's going to be more rain. We're going to solve the drought problem, aren't we? Come on, man. People are going to have to move. So what? Great. We've done this forever. Why stop now? Overpopulation is a hypothesis. How do you know the world's overpopulated? How? This idea that the environment in which we live cannot sustain the amount of people that it has already in it. Like, how idiotic is this? If this certain number of people exists in this sort of environment, then logically the environment must be able to sustain this many people. And if the environment is not able to sustain however many people you don't think it's able to sustain, then it won't be able to sustain these people. It's only going to sustain the amount of people that it can.
And apart from greenhouse gases, why is farming animals bad for the environment?
Why are animals bad for the environment? I mean, well, you're bad for the environment. If you truly believe that we need to exterminate all livestock because people eat livestock, well, why don't you just commit suicide? If you really, this is the logical extension of your worldview. It doesn't make any sense, this worldview. We need animals to exist. We eliminate the animals, we stop existing. Duh. This guy is saying that we're going to kill ourselves by feeding ourselves. This is the ideology of veganism. We have to eliminate our food source in order for us to survive. This is what these people are saying. Vegans all over the place are saying we need to stop eating animal foods to be healthy, and they're all deteriorating, falling apart. Duh. Because that's the ideology. Anti-human.
Are there any other reasons? Yeah.
Because you're taking animals and you're forcing them to be in cages and being separated, and the animals don't like it, and most people don't like how the animals are trapped and don't get to like see light most of the time, and they're mostly confined to their own peers.
Yeah. So there's the ethical argument as well, which is why I went vegan to begin with and how animals are treated. And so that's the thing about being, I guess the word is vegan, and we'll come on to what that means in a minute, is there's so many reasons to live that way.
You can't live as a vegan. We, as the human species, we cannot live by being vegan, right? But this is the agenda. To depopulate the world, to make you weak and sickly, make you dependent on big pharma because you need supplements to survive on this vegan diet. You're not going to thrive, but to barely survive, you're going to need all these supplements. And, well, the people that really are genetically ill-suited for the vegan diet, those people, which are, well, people that have traditionally lived in colder climates, relying on these animals, well, those people are going to die off first, right? So all the brown and black people are going to do better, not much better, a little bit better, and all the light-skinned, fair-skinned people, you're going to perish.
But say we have an area, and that area is full of trees, but we want to graze animals on that land. What do we have to do with the trees?
Cut them down and replace them.
Absolutely.
If we cut down all the trees, like if we cut down trees, we can
Less oxygen. And so we have a situation where we're having to cut down huge amounts of trees and forests and land and habitats, which is, a bad thing because all those trees absorb all the carbon dioxide that we're releasing through transportation and through other means. But at the same time, we're replacing those trees with animals that produce really bad greenhouse gases for our environment.
First and foremost, most of the pastures in this world are steppes, grasslands. They're not forests, okay? This land is already there. It exists. It's available. You could put animals there without much impact on the environment, with even arguably a positive impact on the environment as long as it's managed properly. You can also raise cattle, pigs, chickens, whatever in forests. Of course you can. You can even plant trees in these grasslands, plains. Why not? Of course you can. You honestly think this guy doesn't own any wood furniture? Really? You don't think he drives a car? I mean, he's flying all over the world, brainwashing these little kids. Does he really care about the environment? Walk your ass. This guy doesn't fart. He doesn't belch. He doesn't consume plants. How is the logical conclusion of veganism not anti-human when this guy wants to first and foremost get rid of plant-eating animals, and then he wants to feed you plants, nothing but plants, while at the same time wanting to get rid of plant-eating animals? I mean, come on. And here he is acknowledging that trees absorb methane and CO2. Okay, just plant more trees then. What's the big deal? There's plenty of places in the world where you could plant trees. Start with all these goddamn cities where you cut down all the trees in order to be able to live. We need to cut down forests in order to be able to build houses because we need the land for these houses and we need building material for these houses. So we should stop building houses, right? This is completely anti-human. Every single facet of this ideology is anti-humanity.
So who here heard about the study that said we had 12 years to avoid runaway climate change?
He's a globalist shill. That's who this guy is. Studies. He's going to tell little 10-year-olds about studies. Well, the UN said that the climate is running away. Well, it must be true, right? Scaremongering. He's going to give these little kids anxiety.
There was another study that was released last year, and it said that 83% of all global farmland is used just for animal farming.
Because it's the best source of nutrition.
Alone. Yet it only provides us with, say, 18% of our calories and around 30% of our protein worldwide. So we're dedicating such huge amounts of land for such a small amount of our daily food or our necessary daily food that we consume globally.
First of all, as with most of these studies, it's probably bullshit. They've been exposed over and over again how these studies are biased, how the people conducting them are corrupt, how they have a conflict of interest because they're vegetarians and vegans. And it's all BS. It's just part of this global agenda to, well, kill the livestock and feed you what livestock eats, turning you into livestock. And since we already know what they want to do to livestock, well, I mean, do I really need to repeat myself?
Obviously, I'm talking a lot about veganism. And so maybe we should establish, what does being vegan mean? Yeah.
You're no longer going to eat anything that comes from animals.
Yeah.
So not even milk or anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Cheese.
No cheese.
Only plants.
Only plants.
This guy's so slimy. If you can't see it, something wrong with you. So slimy.
I mean, the good thing about being vegan is we can make cheese and we can make ice creams and things like that from plants.
It takes a lot less processing to make ice cream from animal products than it does from plants. Why doesn't the amount of processing that's required to make plant ice cream go into this global warming equation? Why doesn't it?
So that if the world went vegan or went to a plant-based diet, we could reduce the amount of agricultural land, so farming land, that we needed by 75%. And we could still feed every human on this planet, but we could reduce it by 75%.
Feed every human on this planet grain. Can you imagine what would happen to people's health if that's primarily what we ate? Look at what happened to our health when we started growing and eating grain. This clown wants to make grain a much bigger portion of our diet, making us that much sicker.
Which means all of a sudden we have so much more land that we can dedicate to growing trees and growing hedgerows and woodlands and forestlands and restoring natural habitats, which will be so amazing for animals in the wild.
Hunger Games. Right? If you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it.
But it'd also be good for absorbing those greenhouse gases that we desperately need to get rid of.
In order to grow these forests and everything that he says he wants done, in order to sustain that sort of biomass, you're gonna need CO2 and methane. Of course you are. So there will have to be tons and tons of animals in these forests in order to process the plant matter and provide fertile soil for all these trees that require lots of nutrients to grow. These animals are going to have to process this plant matter, excrete not only dung, but methane and CO2, which will obviously be necessary to sustain all this biomass, right? Why can't we do that with agriculture? Of course we can.
But so you said that since our population is increasing, we need more food and we need more animals and stuff, so we're cutting down trees. But how do we solve that? Because it's not like we can kill half the population.
No, exactly.
But if the goal is to reduce the population, well, what do? You starve them. Duh. I mean, didn't Stalin do this? Didn't Mao do this? Hasn't this been done over and over and over again? Except now it's going to be done with your consent, dummy.
If we have a cow, we need to feed that cow with food, right? And so do you think that a cow eats more food than a human on a daily basis? Probably, right? And so if we have billions of cows, but we also have billions of sheep that are also grazing all the time, we have billions of pigs and billions of chickens that are always needing to consume food, that means that we're growing lots of food already, and we're using so much land just to produce this food for those animals that we kill.
All those animals eat the kind of food that we can't. That's why it makes sense to eat them, because we cannot eat what they eat. Of course we can't. Just because there's a little bit of overlap, very, very little, the grains that are grown for these animals are not digestible by human beings. It's feed quality grain. And most of what these animals actually eat, if they are raised properly and sustainably, is exactly the type of stuff that we can't eat, like grass, foliage, which is exactly why it makes sense economically to grow these animals on the foods that we cannot eat, and then we eat the animals. And these lands where these animals are grazed are not suitable to grow most crops that humans eat. They're just poor quality pasture. It's good enough for grass. He's basically trying to disrupt the natural cycle of how this planet and us on it evolved. Yes, we've modified it a little bit, but we modified it mimicking nature as much as possible in order not to screw it up, because that's the only way it's going to work. He wants to turn that upside down. That's not going to end well.
And so it would be a better use of our land and also the crops that we grow if we took out the animals from the equation and just gave all that food straight to humans.
How are you going to fertilize the crops? With chemicals, right? And that's so environmentally friendly. How are you going to fertilize these crops to make sure that they grow? They can't grow without fertilizer. And how are you going to provide all these crops with all the micronutrients necessary? Because from what I understand, all the fertilizers are primarily just macronutrients. So this guy is advocating for not only raising our food, which we're not even supposed to be eating in the first place, synthetically, with the use of environmentally damaging chemicals. He's also advocating for less nutritious food, less and less nutritious food. That's what he's advocating for. So if you switch our food source from what we're supposed to be eating to what we're not supposed to be eating, and then you add all these chemicals to it, and further still remove all the nutrition from the food, what is going to happen? We're going to get sick and we're going to die.
Which means that if we do get to, say, 10 billion people by the year 2050, as it's predicted that we might, we'd still be able to grow enough food to feed every mouth on the planet, just with the land that we use now to feed the animals that we don't necessarily have to eat.
Where's the logic here? How are you going to save 10 billion people when there aren't 10 billion people on the planet? How do you save them? So what this guy is saying, not explicitly, but what he's saying is that there are too many of us. We're overpopulated, right? While at the same time, he's saying that we need more food in order to grow our population from this supposed 7 billion to 10 billion. this ideology doesn't make any sense. It's self-refuting.
I mean, I guess the question is, do we have to eat animal products like meat, dairy, and eggs to live, or can we survive on plants? What do you think?
It's never been done. Of course we can't, because it's never been done. If we could, and it was better for us, look, logically, if this is better economically, if it's easier, if it's just all around a better solution, how come nature hasn't figured that out? How come? Because it's not. These people think they could improve on nature because nature is a fallacy.
So what we have to remember is that farmers only breed these animals into existence because we buy them. And so what's going to happen is if the world gradually shifts to a plant-based diet, it's going to be a very slow shift. So this is where we are now with vegans, and this is where we are now with the number of animals that we breed. So what will happen is as the number of vegans rises, very slowly, probably over a period of decades, the number of animals we breed into existence will slowly decline as well, because farmers won't breed animals that they can't sell necessarily, which means that by the time we get to a point where the majority of us may be a vegan or plant-based, we'll have very few animals left that we're breeding into existence.
Animal holocaust, right? That's what he's advocating for. So all these vegans are using the definition incorrectly because farmers are maintaining these animal lineages. They're maintaining and actually growing their numbers. Okay? What vegans are advocating for is eradicating these animals while telling you that you're holocausting them. Right? This whole ideology is ass backwards. All of it. Every single, it's upside down.
One of the problems that comes with an increase in veganism is obviously there'll be less animal farmers. And so the question becomes, well, what happens to these farmers? Many animal farmers can switch to plant farming.
So a minute ago, he was saying how there's all this land dedicated to livestock and how if we eliminate all the livestock, we're going to be using less land to grow our food. Now, assuming that that's correct, how is using less land going to require the same amount of farmers? So he's saying that the only way we could sustain a larger population, assuming that this is correct, is by growing nothing but plant food, right? Our population is going to grow. So our population is going to grow, but we're going to use less land to farm. Really?
And so there's a couple of options for that. And one could be this idea of vertical farming. So vertical farming is really exciting. And what it means is that we can grow plants in big warehouses anywhere technically in the world.
So these warehouses are just going to build themselves? I mean, don't you need resources to build these things? He's acting like that's not going to pollute, like that's not going to have any impact on the environment. You're going to have to construct all these huge facilities. You're going to have to pump water to whatever floor, however high you make them. Of course, that's going to use electricity. You're going to have fancy ventilation systems. I mean, come on. Climate control. Come on. Really? Fuck out of here.
And so we have an issue now where we fly avocados from Mexico or Peru, which isn't very good for the environment at all. What we could technically do is we could grow avocados here in Holland or anywhere in the world in this vertical farming system, because it's all indoor and the farmers basically simulate what it would happen naturally.
If he's so worried about the environment, why is he trying to create all these micro environments isolated from the environment? So he basically wants to take nature out of nature. He wants to create these climate controlled, isolated environments like, I don't know, biodome or something. And he wants to put nature in a cage. He wants to have these little bubbles of climate controlled environments, ecosystems that are going to produce waste products that he's just going to dump outside of the bubble. But as long as the little bubble is pristine, everything is going to be A-okay. You're going to have these little pockets if his dream is to come true. This guy's a fucking idiot, man. He wants to have these little pockets of these pristine environments where everything is locked up that are essentially pissing and shitting on Mother Nature. Because that's good for the environment. But don't you dare put animals in cages, right? Don't you dare do that.
So this is why we could use renewable energy. So we have an issue now where we use fossil fuels for electricity and energy. But how about in the future, if we championed renewable energy? What we could do is create more sustainable forms of farming through plant farming.
Plant farming is not more sustainable. Unless everybody has a veganic garden, then you're not going to use any animals and maybe you could make it sustainable. I doubt it. because you're going to have to compost plant matter, which will release CO2 and methane in order to feed these plants. Or you could replace that nutrition with chemicals, but we already talked about that, how that's not good for the environment either. This is complete and utter destruction of nature, what he's advocating for, while telling you that this is environmentalism. It isn't.
How could we convince the farmers to stop doing that? Because it's not like you can tell them one day that they have to change the way they're living.
No.
Well, I mean, we could by just turning vegan because the demand won't be as much.
Yeah.
We can't sell as much, and they will find other jobs.
Exactly.
But that's why he's there, brainwashing the little kids to stop eating meat.
And we help them. You know, farmers are struggling, say, as more people drink soy milk. Dairy farmers won't be able to sell as much milk. And so what we can do is we can say to them, look, why don't you start producing oats or soya or something like that, and then you can join this growing market of plant-based milk.
Help them? I'm sorry, I have yet to see vegans helping farmers, animal farmers, find other sources of revenue, or providing them with farmland where they could grow plants, encouraging them to switch to plant farming, providing them with resources and subsidies, helping them out. I don't see any of this. What are you talking about? None of this is happening. We help them? The guy's a fucking liar. Why? What motivation do these people have to start helping these farmers? When all they're doing so far is attacking them, terrorizing them, and just being complete assholes. They're just going to flip a switch magically and help them out because Earthling Ed says so.
What happens if we drop a drop of water into the pond? Makes a ripple. And then what happens to that ripple? It's bigger. And so I want you to think of yourself as a drop of water, and I want you to think of the world as being this pond. And so every time that you make a decision to help the environment, and that could be buying the vegan sandwich at lunch, what that does is that means that you're dropping it into that pond. And that one impact or that one action may not seem that significant because the pond's full of water, but actually what you do is you cause a ripple. But that one drop of water can change the landscape of the pond.
A drop of water does not change the landscape of a pond. These drops of water are necessary to keep the pond a pond, to maintain it as it were. But yes, I know what the ripple effect is. It's a cute little story, right?
And so think of yourself as a drop of water that has the capacity and the ability to change how the world looks just by making simple choices every single day with the abilities that you have.
Oh, how cute. What a great human being. Look at him feeding the cow. It's so contradictory. He's doing what farmers do, okay? While at the same time advocating for destroying farms. He's giving you this image of what would traditionally happen on a family farm. And it gives you this nice warm feeling, right? You're loving it. Oh, he's such a great person, right? He's doing exactly that which farmers do. This is what they do. But he wants to eradicate that. So he's using this image of like a traditional family farm that resonates with you because it's somewhere in there, in you. Still. So you respond to it favorably. He's using the very thing that makes you feel good to destroy the very thing that makes you feel good. And why does it make you feel good? Because animal protein is extremely nutritious. It creates happy feelings. It nourishes you. It's amazing. It's good for you. He's using the image of this very thing that you resonate with. Why? Because we still have this bond with these animals for a very good reason, because these animals have allowed us to be us, and we've allowed these animals to be the way they are. He's using the very image of this thing that you know on some level is good, which isn't to say that there aren't some sad moments there, but such is life. Life feeds life. Death is necessary to sustain life. It is what it is. That's nature. It's natural. This very thing that makes you feel good for many reasons, physically and psychologically, mentally, obviously they're all intertwined. He's using that very thing to destroy that very thing. Right? This isn't logical, people. Think about it.